The NBA as a league is all about its stars, and more importantly, where those stars are going to end up, whether it be free agency, trade requests. We're always keeping an eye on who's the next guy to go. Last offseason, it was Donovan Mitchell. This offseason, we've got all kinds of crazy stuff going on with James Harden and Damian Lillard. Who's that next group? Who are the next players that during this year or next offseason are going to be on the move as some of the biggest stars in the league? That's what we have to talk about today. First up on the list is a player that I think if I had to place a bet on who I think the next, big time player is going to be that's going to be on a different team within the next year, it would be this guy. And that's Pascal Siakam of the Toronto Raptors. Toronto is in a weird place in terms of the direction and the future of their franchise. Fred VanVleet just left. They just retained Jakob Poeltl. They've still got Siakam. They've got OG Anunoby. They've got Scotty Barnes, who's the future of the team. But collectively, those three guys, OG, Scotty Barnes, and Pascal Siakam, it's not a very clean fit between those three guys, and it makes me wonder if Siakam, as the oldest player of that trio, as someone that needs a new contract, as someone that has a good amount of interest around the league, makes me wonder if he's the guy that could be on the move next, because they just lost Fred VanVleet in free agency when they could have traded him at the trade deadline either of the prior 2 years and gotten value out of him, and now they're in the same situation with Siakam. He needs a new contract, and we're getting kind of rumors trickling through that maybe Toronto is exploring the possibility of moving him. Maybe they were looking at sending him to Portland prior to Dame's trade request. Maybe they were looking at sending him to Atlanta before DeJounte Murray signed his new contract extension. And I don't think it would be crazy to think that within the next year, Siakam is going to be on a different team. The problem with that, if you're Toronto, is it's been pretty clear from his standpoint that if you trade him to a team, he is going to play out his free agency and look to go somewhere else when his contract expires, which basically means if you're Toronto, you're not going to get very much in exchange. And really, this has less to do with who Siakam is as a player. He's still very good. I don't think Toronto wants to trade him, but one, his free agency, and two, the direction of their team and being really uncertain about where they're going with all this. First year with a new head coach. I think that whole combination of factors to me points towards the possibility of Siakam being on a different team. And he's the guy that throughout the season and into next offseason, he's the guy that I'm constantly paying attention to as maybe the next piece for one of these contenders that really wants to add a big time player. Because Siakam is very, very good. Make no mistake about it. Next up, let's talk about Paul George with the Clippers. So this is kind of a strange one, right? Because when it comes to Harden or Lillard or a variety of other rumors, like Paul George's name comes up a good amount. And I think that a lot of people are thinking, okay, the reason it's coming up is because the Clippers want to break up the Kawhi Paul George thing. They want to shake up their roster. They want to add a perimeter player potentially in Lillard or Harden rather than, a true wing like Paul George. I don't think that's what's happening here. I think the rumors are legit. I think they have tried to at least explore what kind of value they could get in exchange for Paul George, but I don't think it's just to shake up the roster. I don't think it's to reset everything. I think it just comes down to the fact that obviously him and Kawhi have not been durable. They've not been available. And Kawhi has basically no trade value because he's been even more unreliable than Paul George has in terms of a durability standpoint. But also, these guys are going to want new deals. They're going to want new contracts. They're extension eligible. One of them this summer, the other this fall. I think Kawhi this fall and PG this summer. They're going to want new contracts, and they're going to want the full 4-year, give me as much money as you can contract. And I think these trade rumors that we're getting potentially about Paul George are more so coming from a standpoint of the Clippers don't just want to hand the keys to the franchise continually to Kawhi and Paul George if they're not going to play. And the idea of continually just giving them complete 100% 4-year maxes to play 45 games every year and lose in the first or the second round of the playoffs, that's not very exciting to the Clippers, nor should it be. And the fact that they're exploring the possibility of actually something crazy, actually negotiating a contract with a star player, I know, how wild is that? I think that more so than anything is what is fueling these rumors. And as a result, I don't think those things are going to quiet down anytime soon. If we get partway through the year and the Clippers aren't that good, we could see some real Paul George smoke with some of these trade rumors. And I think that with, again, same thing with Siakam, within the next year, him being on a different team would not be unheard of by any means. Number 3 now, let's talk about LeBron. So this one's a little bit different because it's not necessarily a trade specifically, right? But LeBron being on a different team next year is a very, very real possibility. It comes down to whether or not Bronny actually makes it into the league, and if he ends up wanting to go to that team, if the Lakers do what they'll draft him, and all those different things that we talked about in the past. But an interesting scenario could develop here for LeBron where, yes, he could opt into the Lakers. He could continue to sign with them. Maybe Bronny's not ready for the NBA, whatever the case may be. But he also could just be signed and traded to a team that's already very good to try and win some titles. Like the possibility of LeBron leaving the Lakers in free agency is not limited specifically to him signing a new contract with a team that has cap space. Like that's not the only scenario here. And him possibly getting signed and traded to Philadelphia or Denver or Milwaukee or Miami, like all these possibilities are completely crazy to think about now. But a year from now, they could be very, very realistic depending on what LeBron's goals are at the time and if Bronny makes it to the NBA within the next 1, 2, or 3 seasons. And that to me is an interesting subplot of the entirety of the Lakers season because they had a great offseason. I think they're legitimate contenders. They almost went to the finals last year. Obviously, they got swept by the Nuggets, but they were a very, very good team post-trade deadline last year. And the assumption right now is that LeBron is going to stick around. I'm not 100% sure that's the case. If they disappoint this year and he really wants to chase for that 5th and that 6th ring, another team might have LeBron James on them, next offseason. Last up is a combination entry on the list, and it is Luka and Joel Embiid. Now, I talked about this in a Knicks video a couple of videos ago, where the idea of the Knicks waiting around for Embiid and or Luka a year, 2 years from now is a very real possibility, and that to me isn't specific to the Knicks. The Sixers can't continue to do this to Joel Embiid. They did the Ben Simmons thing where they waited that out. Now they have the James Harden thing to deal with. And Embiid is just there like, hey, I'm one of the best players in the league. I won the MVP last year. Can I have some level of roster stability? Can we not rebuild the entire team and rebuild the entire rotation every single season? Can I have some sort of continuity here with the roster? And at some point, frustration has to start to set in when you're Embiid. You know that you're being compared to Giannis and Jokic and all these other guys that are on the same timeline as him, that are having that level of championship success and postseason success that Embiid just isn't having. Now, some of that has to do with Embiid himself being hurt, not performing super well in the postseason, but at a certain point, no matter how much he loves Philadelphia and being a part of that team, you do have to wonder if he starts thinking that the Knicks or the Heat or one of these other teams represents a better championship opportunity. And same thing with Luka. The reason that I'm completely cautious of the Kyrie thing in Dallas is because you're risking a ton. You're risking the future of your franchise on having Kyrie Irving around, and the future of your franchise is, of course, Luka. If he starts to get unhappy, if he starts to look at other locations, we are going to potentially see a trade demand from him within the next couple of seasons, because just sticking around in Dallas to win 45 to 50 games and not really, be really that much of a factor in the championship chase, that's not going to cut it for Luka, I don't think. And he's been unbelievable from the moment that he got to Dallas. And when you're that level of player, you start to hold a lot of leverage over your franchise. And if they can't capitalize on that and make it worth it for him to stay, I think he's another guy to keep an eye on as well. But both him and Embiid are more long-term plays compared to the rest of the list. Now, as always with this kind of stuff, more details are going to develop over the next handful of months, and there's going to be someone that we didn't expect to be available that suddenly will be. And that's the beauty of the NBA, is there's always stuff to pay attention to when it comes to player movement, when it comes to star trades. And that's the point of me doing this video every single year. I pointed out Donovan Mitchell 2 years ago. You always kind of have to think ahead in terms of who may or may not be on the move, and I think this is a pretty solid list to start with.